Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife, Kara, is busy. And in this video, we are doing the review on the WE Knife 620. So there's a bunch of different models of this. The 620E, the 620A. I don't know exactly which number this one is, but it's the 620. Either way, let's get into it. So this knife was sent to me by Casey Tyler. Thank you, Casey Tyler, for letting me check out some of your knives. I've always wanted to check out this knife among a lot of other WE knives. WE has made so many knives, and this is one of their older models, and you can tell that from some of their star bits and just the way the hardware is. And speaking of the hardware, let's talk about that really quick. So it did have a little bit of play when I got it, and I don't have the bit because one of the problems with having proprietary hardware is that you need their bit, which I do know they send with the knives. They have them, at least as far as I know of, but I did not receive it when I got this from Casey Tyler, so I had to improvise. So what I did was basically I got a stick of hot glue and I melted the flat end of it, not all the way, but to where, you know, it could mold into something. I melted it down, got it really hot, and then I pushed it into the star, you know, pivot until it molded basically to it and cooled down, and then I peeled it off. And I know it's not something that would work long term, but I just needed to be able to turn the pivot because I had tried everything from using my finger and pushing my finger and spinning it with my finger and like other little things, and nothing seemed to work. But the hot glue stick trick did work, so lucky me, now it is locked up pretty solid. I don't think it'll stay solid very long without having the bit to really crank it down, because I wasn't able to really crank on it, but I was able to improvise and get it tightened up. Now, like I said before, there are a lot of older models that, and even just newer models. There's lots of models across the board, a bunch of discontinued models to just models across the board by WE that I would love to check out. This being one of them. So let's just get right into it. So this knife is 8.6 inches. Yeah, it's basically 8 5/8 total length, maybe 8 3/4, because you have this little, you know, thing back here poking out, but 8 5/8. And then the blade length is 3 3/4. Couple real quick size comparisons. Spyderco PM2. You can see it's pretty close, but the WE knife is a bit bigger. Here is the Spyderco Manix XL, which is pretty much right on the money with that. I don't need to show the small one or the Manix 2, the regular one, but I will. So you can see it right there. It's a large knife, but it doesn't feel as giant as like the Manix 2 XL. And then here is the Kaiser Sheepdog, the large version. Sorry for the lighting, I'll fix that right now. And here's the Cold Steel Code 4. A lot of people know the size of that, and you can see the Cold Steel Code 4 is a bit bigger. So, let's get into it. So this knife has an M390 blade, sheep's foot blade, decently thick blade stock with a titanium frame lock handle, titanium clip, and titanium back spacers. You can see how the back spacers are placed. Pretty cool. So I did sharpen this up because it did come with an edge that needed to be tuned up a bit, and in order to use it and to really, you know, understand how it worked, I wanted to sharpen it, you know, give it a proper edge. I didn't like go crazy on it or nothing. I put a 600 grit edge on it, which came out pretty good. I used diamond stone, started with a 300 grit, worked my way up to the 600 grit. After finishing up on the 600 grit, I strapped it on a leather strap with some compound and the edge came out very nice. And I did use it a little bit after sharpening it, and I just basically cut up just some basic cardboard. I didn't go crazy or nothing. I just basically wanted to feel how it felt in the hand and how it felt choked up and how it went through materials. So after cutting with it, with what I did with it, I got a pretty good idea of how it cuts, how the leverage is off of it. And, it's pretty good. It's not bad. I will say that, this M390 blade steel is, it's got a pretty thick blade stock of 160 thousandths. And then behind the edge thickness is about 20 thousandths. So, not the best blade geometry. And, back then, when this came out, or when this was first designed, we and Riat and a lot of companies were making really thick, heavy-duty knives. That's just the way it was. And people wanted that. Now we does some of the most amazing blade geometry knives there are out there. I mean, they do amazing hollow grind, Civivi, basically all of them. They do great blade geometry. But the reason why it changed, in my opinion, this is just based on my opinion, is that in the heyday of when this came out, there were a lot of knife collectors, and I'm sure there were a lot of knife users. But the collectors at the time were looking for those beefy knives. Then you got the users that started noticing the community and that were carrying pocket knives, but they were carrying pocket knives to use. Then they slowly started infiltrating the community, and they started making small complaints like how a knife cuts and how it uses, how it sharpens, how it this, how it that. And slowly but surely the knife companies started changing the performance around towards cutting performance. They started realizing that we can't just make knives for pictures. We need to start making knives that actually function like a knife. And I'm not saying this knife doesn't function like a knife. This knife functions just fine. Great knife. But I'm just saying, like, where the difference came in and why they started thinning out the blades, why they started doing deeper hollow grinds, why they started doing better blade geometry, was because people started actually using their tools. And they would hear how another knife outperformed a more expensive knife, all because of blade geometry. So this one's pretty average when it comes to geometry. It's not the thinnest behind the edge. It's very average behind the edge. The taper does, like I said, it does get a little thick. So it's going to cut just fine. It cuts good, but it doesn't cut great. It's not going to be your massive slicer, but it's also not going to be no slouch either. It's pretty much sitting right there in, like I said, the average point where you're not going to be scared to carry and use it. It's going to have a lot of strength behind the edge, and so I guess in that sense it is a very strong blade, and it's a big knife, so it should be pretty strong. Would I have liked to have seen it thinned out a little bit? Of course, but I understand where this knife came from. But still, very nice. Very nice sharpening tool, very easy to sharpen. Nice blade shape to sharpen too. Very easy to sharpen. It's basically all belly, but it's still a very easy blade shape to sharpen. And then you see we have the fuller and the thumb stud. Right here, it is just thumb stud action. So let's get into the action, and then we'll get into the ergos. So these thumb studs are actually pretty nice. They're a little pokey with the star bit, but it actually, since they sit up so high, they're very easy to get to and very easy to use. I actually very much like the detent and the action from this knife. Very, very smooth drop. You can easily do a reverse flick. Now this fuller, you can use it if you use it low, right there. If you use it really down low, down right there, and you wedge your finger in there. But there's no need, because you can get it right off of the thumb stud. And you have a lot of leverage on the thumb stud from your hand. You got a good grip, solid purchase to the thumb stud. Pow! Nice strong detent. It's not even that it's strong, it's finely tuned. We has been doing great work from the beginning of their, since they first started knives. So even left-handed, I have no problem doing the action. So that says a lot about the action. Now, the when you unlock it, the lock bar is very easy to access. Now, when you unlock it, you want to kind of hold it up a little high to let this part hit your finger instead of down low, because, you do have a chance of the edge coming down, biting you, depending on how low you hold it. So I hold it up high, stops it right there. It's past the detent. The detent is basically right there, so it's nice and early. I love that. They do not have a detent ramp when you unlock it, but there's no need for it at all. It's always past it. And the drop is basically a fall shut action. I mean, with no shake at all, it shuts. So very, very nice action. You can't kind of hear the bearings a little bit, because it is on bearings with a ceramic detent on the lock bar. It almost has like an integral theme going, but it's not an integral. It is 4 pieces. You have jimping all over, which adds to the leverage and the grip. The grip is very nice on this thing. I did get nice cuts holding it like this, pushing straight down. Worked really good. I feel very locked in with this little hump in between my 2 fingers. This pad right here is very comfortable on your palm when pushing. And then when you're back here, you do have all this jimping, which this jimping doesn't do too much, but this jimping does right there. So you have that purchase for your slicing. Now, I found myself, holding it basically over the top of this when I was really cutting. Back here was a little far back for me. I felt like I was losing leverage holding it this far back, and I felt like I really had good leverage holding it just a little bit higher. Not a big deal. The finish, you can see it has the texturing, which you do actually feel. You can hear it under my skin. So it's not that it's slick at all. It actually adds some texture to your grip. And when you're using it, that little bit means everything. Even though it's not a lot, I can easily slide my finger back and forth. It's not like it's really extra grippy, but it does add that little bit. You can kind of hear it to my fingers when I'm pulling through a cut. I didn't do any reverse cuts, but I don't doubt that it wouldn't be just fine, especially how it's angled back towards you just a little bit to get behind straps and pop them. So very nice. The clip in hand, I don't really feel it, to be honest. The clip is nice in the hand. Now, in use, it's not the best clip. It doesn't have a lot of tension. Going in and out of the pocket, it's just fine. It works just fine. I have no real complaints about it, but I'm not going to call it a great clip. I'm not going to say this clip is amazing. I'm not going to do that because it's not that type of clip. It's not a bad clip either. It works. It is kind of light, going in and out of the pocket. It just lightly goes in and lightly goes out. You don't get a lot of tension from it. You don't feel resistance holding on to the pocket. And I mean, those things are good things. It's good to have a little bit of resistance hanging onto your pocket. You don't get that from it at all, but it still works. Now, if I was jumping up and down really high, I don't doubt that it couldn't possibly pop up and out. I don't know. I didn't try it, but it's a possibility. I don't know. The centering is pretty decent. The fit, the finish, everything is well done on this knife. It's exactly what you'd think to see from We. They did an incredible job with it, but there are always some bad things. So let's get to some of them bad things. So one thing is, you see inside here how they have this back, the back spacer right here. This is the stop pin. So it actually stops right there. It has the ceramic bearing, ceramic detent, and when it comes around, it locks up right there. That's fine. I like that. That's nice, strong construction. But they have this whole piece right here to come up with a stop for the close position. there's a place that hits right here on the blade to stop it, to lock it in. So the detent drops in place and it stops on a pin right there. Well, that pin happens to land right there under the edge. They had all the room right here, which I think it still hits a little bit because you can see it. It's actually right here under my finger right now. And the place that hits right there is this spot right there. You can see it bulging out right there. So I just wish they wouldn't have put it right there and they would have let this part get hit instead. That way all of this could be easily sharpened and you don't have to worry about sharpening back to that. Now, of course, you can just not let it sharpen back and try to keep sharpening up, but it's just something a little extra you're going to have to think about. You don't ever want to keep sharpening and the edge will just keep growing up the blade as you sharpen, and eventually, which isn't very long, it will go past right there. So it's just something you got to be cognizant of. So I wish they would have just let it hit right here because they had all the room in the world. Now, I think it does hit here also, but I think the main spot that locks it in is right where you see that mark, and that's why that mark's there. Now, another bad thing, which, you know, it's because of like what I had to do with the glue, the proprietary hardware, but they changed that already. So I can't really complain about that too much because they already changed it. They changed it to just regular hardware like this. This knife was built by WE, just regular titanium hardware, which I am happy with. So this is the drop Terzola knife. But yeah, anyways, next thing. I already said about the clip. This is another part. Now, this one actually it kind of bugs me a little bit. This backspacer, or not backspacer, sorry, this lanyard hole is back here. I don't think this knife needs a lanyard at all. And not only does it not need a lanyard, which isn't the part I'm complaining about, look at it. It's like they made it pointy. So now in my hand, when I go like this, it's stabbing me in the palm when I hold it like that. Now, if, you know, smaller hands probably would just hold it up here and it probably wouldn't never poke them. But with me, it pokes my hand to use it. So I got to try to avoid that and try to lay it like that to do it. So I don't sit there and stab myself in the hand constantly. Then when I'm putting it in and out of the pocket, when I go to push it in, it pokes me. And then when I'm pulling it out of the pocket and I go to grab it, it's like I'm getting poked in the finger trying to pull it out. It's just pokey. It's just a spot that constantly pokes you. And why wouldn't they just round that off? Why at all would they want it to hang up like that? I mean, to me, maybe it's a glass breaker. I could totally break glass with that, for sure. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that I couldn't break some glass with that. But I don't think it's advertised as a glass breaker. If they wanted a lanyard hole, they could have just rounded this off. Not in a sharp way, but in a more contoured way. But not that big of a... I mean, it's not that big of a deal because I guess... I mean, it is a big deal because it constantly pokes me, but I suppose you could file it down if it really bothered you that bad. But anyways, the jimping back here does work really good, so you do have a little bit of texture to hang on from slipping in your palm. So you don't have to have it poke you in the hand, you know, but when you have large hand size, it just tends to happen. But all in all, I really like this knife. I think this is a fantastic knife, and I think it really shows what we can do and how quality and strong and great their builds are. I think this might be discontinued now. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure you can still get it. Yeah, you can still get it for $253. So that is a hefty price. That is not cheap. $253 is an expensive knife, but you're getting an M390 titanium, great fit and finish. And would I like to see it at a better price point? Yeah, I would, because it is from China, but you are getting a very high-end knife. And some of these knives that come from WE don't even, like, a lot of other companies don't even come close to the quality that you get from WE knives. So I understand the price point and I'm not mad at it. But, you know, it's just sometimes when you get in those price ranges, you kind of feel like, man, maybe I should just get a USA made knife or something like that. Not always, and everybody thinks differently, but it's still, though, for the $250 price range from WE, you are right in their their happy zone. That's where you're going to get about the best from Wee's quality. So there you guys go. I love you guys. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Peace.